Dream of the Red Chamber, Chapter 114.
We are going to trace the specific mechanisms of how an incredibly elite institution, in this case, the Jia family, just unravels.
And we're tracking a very specific compounding failure here. Like, this isn't a sudden explosive demolition, right?
No, not at all.
It is a meticulous, slow-motion diagnostic of institutional rock.
Exactly. So just to orient you within the timeline, we are entering the narrative at a point of, well, absolute crisis.
Yeah, the Jia family has been the apex of the social hierarchy, like a family so wealthy and connected they practically functioned as a regional government.
Wow.
But now, imperial favor has vanished. The estate has been raided. Their assets confiscated by the state.
Just a total disaster.
Right. And the matriarch, Grandmother Jia, has passed away. And Wang Xifeng, who previously acted as the ruthless, highly effective chief operating officer of the domestic sphere, she's on her deathbed.
The compounding failures are just everywhere you look. We have the loss of spiritual and psychological grounding, the collapse of immediate safety nets, the predation of the inner circle, and honestly, the total failure of executive leadership.
The textbook collapse.
It really is. And as we work through these stages, I want you to consider the dynamics of your own institutions. When a system starts to fail, whether that's a family, a corporation, or, a society who attempts to hold the line.
Right, and who immediately cashes out.
Exactly. And how much of the ensuing disaster is actually inevitable.
Well, the question of inevitability is precisely where the narrative begins.
Okay, let's get into it.
The text drops us straight into Wang Xifeng's sick room. The servants rush to Jia Baoyu and his wife Xu Bochai in the dead of night.
Right.
And they report that Xifeng is speaking in total delirium.
So the servants note this is happening between the third and fourth watch, right?
Yes, exactly.
So we are in the deepest, most isolated hours of the night. But the content of Xifeng's delirium is what requires real analysis here. She isn't just screaming or speaking nonsense.
No, it's very specific.
Right. She is aggressively demanding a paper boat and a sedan chair. She insists she needs these specific items so she can travel back to Jinling to be recorded in a register or a sezi.
The mechanics of her hallucination are steeped in a very specific cultural understanding of destiny. In the traditional Chinese cosmological framework, the afterlife and the spiritual realm are not, they're not abstract, ethereal places.
Oh, interesting. So what are they like?
They are highly bureaucratic.
Yeah.
The underworld mirrors the imperial civil service.
Oh, wow. So it's all paperwork down there, too.
Literally. So when Xifeng demands a paper boat, which would typically be burned as a funerary offering to transfer goods to the spirit world,
right,
and she references these registers, she is anticipating the administrative paperwork of her own death.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second.
Yeah.
She is seeing the ledger of her fate.
Yes.
It's a chilling moment because it strips away the poetry of death and replaces it with cold administration.
Exactly. It's terrifying in a very mundane way.
When Bai hears this report from the servants, his initial reaction is pure confusion. He wonders why on earth Xifeng would be traveling back to Jinling, their ancestral home, in her current state.
Right. But then his maid, Jiren, leans in and reminds him of a profound, mystical dream he experienced years prior.
Oh, the dream.
Yeah. Jiren jogs his memory about his journey to the land of illusion, where he was actually permitted to view the registers of fate for the women in his life.
Right. These registers were literal books, weren't they?
Yes, categorized by the status of the women, containing cryptic poems forecasting their tragic ends.
That's so heavy.
It is. And Jiren reminds him that Xifeng's return to Jinling was explicitly documented in those ledgers.
The moment Jiren mentions the dream, Baiyu's entire worldview shifts. The realization hits him that human existence might be governed by a fixed number, like a predetermined fate that has already been written down, filed, and stamped by the cosmic bureaucracy.
And his subsequent reaction is highly revealing of his character.
Oh, absolutely. He immediately laments his own lack of memory. He wishes he possessed the power of absolute foresight so he could simply know everyone's destiny.
Right, just to save himself the agonizing trouble of worrying about their futures. He vocalizes a desire for omniscience.
Which is such a massive leap.
It is. He states that if he could foresee it all, he wouldn't have to blindly suffer on their behalf. This is a profound philosophical pivot. Baoyu is faced with the imminent death of a family member and the collapse of his entire material world.
And his psychological defense mechanism is to retreat into fatalism.
Exactly. Just complete surrender.
Oh, wait, is Bao Yu just looking for an easy out here? Like, we need to scrutinize that fatalism because it functions as an incredibly convenient escape hatch, doesn't it?
100%. If the Jia family's ruin is simply a matter of cosmic accounting,
Right.
if the ledgers in Jinling have already dictated the collapse, then Bao Yu is absolved of any practical responsibility.
Exactly. He doesn't have to concern himself with auditing the estate's finances or securing their remaining assets if the ship was categorically destined to sink from the moment it was built.
Fatalism provides immense comfort to the powerless, but it also provides an alibi for the passive.
Oof, that's a great way to put it.
I mean, if destiny is a fixed track, human agency is an illusion. You cannot be blamed for a train crash if you were never allowed to touch the brakes.
Right. Which brings us to Bao Chai. This is precisely why the narrative immediately introduces a counterforce to Bao Yu's existential surrender.
Yes, his wife steps into the conversation and completely rejects this entire framework.
I love this part. Bao Chai overhears them whispering about foresight and destiny, and Bao Yu, still reeling from his cosmic epiphany, essentially asks her if she possesses the ability to see into the future given her usual intelligence and awareness.
And Bao Chai does not indulge him for a fraction of a second. She dismantles his romantic fatalism using brutal, empirical evidence from their immediate reality.
Oh, she shuts it down.
Completely. She constructs a highly illogical argument centered around another character, Miao Yu.
Right, the nun.
Exactly. Miao Yu is a nun residing in the family's garden, known for her intense spiritual asceticism and her supposed connection to the divine.
Okay.
Bao Chai reminds Bao Yu of a recent incident where an item, a jade piece, went missing, and Xing Xian sought out Miao Yu to perform a specific type of divination to locate it.
The mechanism of that divination is critical here. They utilize the Fuji, or the planchette, right?
Yes, exactly.
So for context, this is a form of spirit writing where a suspended stick or stylus is guided by a deity to write characters in a tray of sand or ashes.
Right. It was a widely practiced method for seeking guidance from the spiritual bureaucracy we just discussed.
But the results of Miao's planchette session were totally incomprehensible. It yielded absolute gibberish.
Yes, and Bao Chai highlights the failure of the planchette. But she drives the argument home by pointing to a much larger, darker irony.
What happened?
Well, Miao Yu, the supposed master of esoteric knowledge, recently suffered a catastrophic personal disaster.
Oh, right.
She was abducted by bandits.
Wow.
So Bao Chai points out the undeniable contradiction. If this deeply spiritual mystic couldn't even foresee the violent destruction of her own life.
How can anyone possibly claim the power of reliable foresight? That is such a good point.
It's devastating logic.
Bao Chai's exact framing is just brutal. She argues that any past predictions that happen to come true were merely statistical coincidences.
Yep, just dumb luck.
She calls the obsession with spiritual hints and cosmic registers absurd and unbelievable. She demands that Bao Yu anchor himself to the immediate material reality.
Because when you face systemic failure, whether that's a corporate bankruptcy or a sudden medical crisis, the instinct to read the tea leaves and search for a grand, comforting narrative is powerful.
It really is.
But Bao Chai represents the cold necessity of looking at the actual data on the ground.
Right. And her rejection of the mystical is not necessarily a rejection of religion as a whole, right?
No. It's a rejection of mysticism as a tool for practical management. She views Bao Yu's fixation on the registers as a dangerous distraction. And her pragmatism seamlessly translates into her strategy for their physical survival.
So, as step one of the collapse, the loss of psychological grounding takes hold of Bao Chai is already initiating step two, attempting to secure a physical safety net.
Exactly. Which brings us to the reality of their marriage and their living situation.
Right. Bao Chai forces Bao Yu to examine the actual mechanics of how they were wed.
Yeah, and in Qing Dynasty high society, an aristocratic marriage was an immense logistical and financial undertaking.
Huge.
It required elaborate dowries, extensive banquets, the exchange of incredibly valuable gifts, and months of heavily ritualized social signaling.
Basically, it was a massive transfer of wealth and a public cementing of political alliances.
Exactly. But Bao Chai explicitly details the stark contrast of their own union.
She describes it as rushed, severely frugal, and stripped of almost all ceremonial pomp.
Right, and she isn't recounting this out of bitterness. She is utilizing it as an audit of their environment.
She lists the intercepting crises that necessitated this makeshift marriage. First, Bayu's brother, Jia Zhen, had been implicated in crimes and was facing severe legal and political penalties, making any large celebration a massive political risk.
Yeah, you don't throw a huge party when your brother is facing imperial charges.
Exactly. Plus, the broader family had been decimated by the imperial raids.
Right.
Furthermore, she cites the intense domestic suffering of Wang Xifeng, the woman currently dying, who had been stripped of her managerial power.
And subjected to harsh treatment by her mother-in-law, Lady Xing, in the wake of the confiscations.
Right. So what's fascinating here is Bao Chai is demonstrating a high-level strategic awareness.
Oh, incredibly high level. She explains to Bao Yu that she and her mother agreed to this severely downgraded marriage because they accurately read the political and economic indicators.
They saw the writing on the wall.
Exactly. They recognized the volatility of the Jia state and adapted instantly. Bao Chai even commends Xifeng for her current behavior, noting that despite the poverty and the fall from grace, Xifeng had found a way to peacefully serve Bao Chai's mother. Bao Chai is constantly evaluating the adaptability of the people around her.
And because she is constantly evaluating the board, she recognizes that their current position is untenable.
Right.
She reveals to Bao Yu that her mother is actively planning to sever their physical connection to the Jia family's communal estate. They intend to relocate to a separate, smaller property that they still legally control.
To understand the gravity of this move, we have to look at the structural foundation of the Confucian family system.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The communal estate is not just a shared residential space. It is the physical manifestation of the family's collective power, their economic pooling, and their social identity.
So it's everything.
Basically, yes. Multiple generations and branches of the family living under one massive roof is the aesthetic and practical ideal. Leaving the compound is a structural breach.
Which perfectly explains Bao Yu's immediate and visceral resistance. I mean, he complains intensely about the logistics.
Oh, he hates it.
He points out that moving away means visiting will require an entire day of travel. He argues for the convenience of staying put.
Right.
But his resistance isn't really about the commute time, is it? I mean, why is Bao Yu so blind to the necessity of leaving?
Because the estate is literally crumbling around him. The wealth is gone. The political protection is gone. And yet Bao Yu is arguing to stay inside the burning building because it's the only warmth he has ever known.
Wow.
He is clinging to the psychological safety of the collective. Bao Yu cannot process structural failure. He processes emotional disruption.
But Bao Chai thinks entirely in terms of systemic survival.
Yes, she does.
She delivers a line that serves as the thesis statement for her entire worldview. Although we are relatives, it's better for everyone to be situated on their own. There is no one who lives at a relative's house for a lifetime.
It is a brilliant surgical assessment of their reality. Bao Chai recognizes that the communal safety net is now a liability.
The pooled resources have been drained by the government raids and internal debt. The shared political identity is now a target for imperial scrutiny.
Right. Moving out is a mechanism of self-preservation. She is actively cutting the rope before the falling climber pulls her off the mountain as well.
That's a great analogy. She understands that when the capital dries up, the social contracts that bind the communal estate together will inevitably turn cannibalistic.
And the narrative immediately proves her thesis correct.
Oh, it really does.
Step 3 of the collapse. The predation of the inner circle begins the very moment Wang Xifeng draws her last breath.
The speed of the predation is horrifying. Wang Xifeng dies, and the immediate crisis falls onto her husband, Jia. The text is brutally explicit about the mechanics of his financial ruin.
Yeah, the aristocratic economy they operated within heavily relied on agricultural stipends from their rural estates and the management of vast stores of physical goods.
But the raids confiscated the reserves, and the estates are failing. Jia doesn't just lack the funds for a grand funeral. He lacks the daily operating cash to manage the household's immediate needs.
And you have to understand, funerals in this society were not just private moments of grief.
Right.
They were massive, highly visible displays of social capital. The opulence of the funeral directly correlated to the surviving family's ongoing political and social viability.
So a cheap funeral is basically social suicide.
Exactly. Jillian is paralyzed because he understands that a cheap funeral for a woman of Xifeng's previous stature will signal to the entire capital that the Jia family is truly irrevocably broken.
So desperate for a localized infusion of cash, Jia summons backup. He calls for Wang Ren, who is Wang Xifeng's biological brother. Now, you would assume the brother of the deceased would provide emotional support or, at the very least, leverage his own network to front the capital for his sister's burial.
You would assume that, yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Instead, Wang Ren arrives and immediately begins to audit the funeral preparations. He doesn't offer a single copper coin.
No, not one.
He observes the meager setup and begins to complain loudly, demanding prestige.
Right. He argues that his sister exhausted herself managing the Jia household for years and that she deserves a send-off commensurate with her labor.
He is demanding that the Jia family manufacture wealth that he knows full well they no longer control.
It's an incredible display of toxic entitlement.
It's like the predatory relative who only shows up at the reading of a will, angry that the inheritance isn't bigger. He demands prestige but refuses to pay for it.
Exactly. And when Jilian essentially ignores him, knowing Wang Ren is operating in bad faith, Wang Ren pivots his strategy.
And this is where it gets really dark.
It does. He turns his attention to a highly vulnerable target. His own niece, Qiaoji, Xifeng's young daughter.
The interaction between Wang Ren and Qiaoji exposes the absolute moral bankruptcy of the high aristocracy in the face of resource scarcity. Wang Ren pulls the grieving child aside and begins a campaign of emotional manipulation.
He implies that Jilian's failure to spend money means he doesn't respect Xifeng's memory. He attempts to weaponize the child's grief against her own father to force spending.
It's just evil. But Qiaoji tries to defend Jilian. She explains the reality. Her father wishes he could afford a proper ceremony, but the capital simply doesn't exist anymore.
And this is where Wang Ren reveals his true motive. He instantly accuses this young girl of hoarding wealth.
Unbelievable.
He claims she still has plenty of assets. When Qiaoji reminds him of the brutal reality of the imperial confiscations from the previous year, Wang Ren flatly refuses to believe it.
To understand Wang Ren's accusation, we really have to look at the mechanics of the dowry system and aristocratic wealth hoarding, right?
Yes, absolutely. Women in these households often maintain private caches of wealth jewelry, gold, silver, separate from the central family accounts, precisely as a hedge against the kind of disaster currently unfolding.
So Wang Ren suspects that Xifeng, being the shrewd manager she was, successfully hid a massive fortune from the imperial auditors.
And from the Jia family matriarchs, intending to save it for Qiaoji's future dowry.
Wow. So he looks at his orphan niece and doesn't see a grieving child. He sees an offshore bank account that refuses to give him the access codes.
That is exactly what he sees. The text provides Wang Ren's internal monologue, revealing his absolute certainty that a secret fortune exists. He makes a conscious vindictive decision to resent Qiaoji from that moment forward, simply because she isn't a viable revenue stream for him to extract.
The biological tie means absolutely nothing without a financial incentive. The highborn relative acts entirely as a parasitic element.
Right, but the source material provides a stunning structural contrast to Wang Ren's predation.
Enter Pinger.
Yes. While the blood relative attempts to squeeze a child for non-existent funds, a character from the absolute margins of the family hierarchy steps in to provide actual salvation.
Pinger's position in the household is incredibly complex. She is a maid, but also a concubine to Jilian, and was previously Xifeng's most trusted confidant and proxy.
Right. She occupies a lower status role, highly vulnerable to the whims of the masters.
Yet Pinger sees the administrative paralysis. She recognizes that Wang Ren is useless and cruel, and that Jilian is out of options.
So Pinger quietly pulls Jilian aside and offers a localized economic bailout.
A bailout from a maid.
Yes. She produces her own personal belongings, valuable items she managed to successfully hide and preserve during the government raids.
That's incredibly risky for her to even reveal she has those.
Exactly. And she instructs Jilian to take her assets, enter the pawnshop economy, and liquidate them to generate the immediate cash flow needed to dignify the funeral.
When Jilian promises to repay her, Pinger dismisses the idea entirely. She states that the items were originally given to her by Xifeng anyway, so there is no debt to repay.
Her only concern is preserving the dignity of the event. The mechanics of what she is doing are profound.
Right. She is taking her only personal safety net, the physical assets that could keep her from starvation if the family dissolves entirely, and sacrificing them to maintain the social standing of the family that technically owns her.
It is a masterful subversion of class expectations. The narrative is explicitly arguing that moral character and nobility are completely decoupled from social rank and biological pedigree.
Oh, completely.
The aristocrat operates on suspicion and extraction. The servant operates on grace, loyalty, and a genuine understanding of duty.
It really makes you evaluate your own network. You know, when the infrastructure collapses, the people holding the fancy titles and the blood connections are often the first to attempt to cannibalize the remains.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
The actual structural support frequently comes from the people operating in the trenches, the ones who understand the mechanics of survival and possess a quiet, unheralded loyalty.
However, we must analyze the scale of Pinger's intervention.
Right.
Liquidating a few hidden hairpins and bracelets provides a temporary influx of cash. It buys them a few days of dignity.
But a pawn shop economy cannot sustain an aristocratic infrastructure. Her sacrifice is noble, but it is a microscopic bandage on a massive systemic arterial bleed.
Which transitions us perfectly into step 4 of the collapse, the total failure of executive leadership.
Because while Jia Lian is scrambling in the domestic sphere for pawnshop cash to bury his wife, the patriarch of the entire Jia clan, Jia Zheng, is sitting in his outer study.
Yes, and he's receiving a forensic audit of the macro collapse.
The shift in perspective from the domestic funeral to the administrative outer study is crucial. Jia Zheng is meeting with a man named Cheng Rixing.
Now, Cheng Rixing's role is vital to understand. He was one of the last remaining guest scholars or retainers.
Right. Historically, powerful families kept a retinue of educated men on retainer to act as advisors, secretaries, and administrative aides, right?
Exactly. But as the family's wealth evaporated, the vast majority of these retainers abandoned the estate. Cheng Rixing is one of the very few who stayed.
So Jia Zheng is complaining to Cheng Rixing about their circumstances. He laments their bad luck, the recent deaths, and the chaotic state of the estate's management.
He is essentially playing the victim of circumstance.
Totally. But Cheng Rixing refuses to coddle him. He delivers an unvarnished, brutal diagnostic of the estate's internal economy.
He targets the specific mechanics of the embezzlement occurring right under Jia Zheng's nose.
Wait, embezzlement?
Yes. He informs the patriarch that every single manager and servant is actively lining their own pockets.
Oh.
The mechanism of the theft is relentless, incremental extraction. Cheng explains that year after year, the staff simply take estate property back to their own homes.
It's death by 1,000 cuts. The overhead of the estate is massive, but the actual assets are being steadily siphoned out the back door by the very people paid to guard them.
Right. And Cheng Rixing points out that the family is bleeding cash not just from the theft itself, but from the massive legal fees incurred trying to chase down the stolen goods in a corrupt judicial system.
It's just a financial nightmare.
It gets worse. Then Cheng Rixing brings up the most glaring symbol of their ruin, the Grandview Garden.
Oh, the garden. This garden was the crown jewel of the Jia family, a massive, hyper-expensive landscaping and architectural marvel built specifically to host a visiting imperial concubine.
Right, it was the physical manifestation of their peak political power.
But Cheng Rixing points out that the garden is now a massive liability. It has become an abandoned, overgrown wasteland.
The family cannot find a buyer to liquidate the asset, but more critically, the staff refuses to enter the grounds.
Why?
They claim the garden is infested with ghosts and spirits.
Okay, and this is where Cheng Rixing's audit becomes truly brilliant. He demystifies the supernatural entirely.
Yes, he does.
He explicitly tells Jia Zheng that the ghosts are an operational cover story. The servants themselves are orchestrating these rumors, playing tricks in the night to terrify the rest of the household.
It is an ingenuity born of corruption. By establishing a narrative that the garden is haunted, the corrupt managers create a massive, unmonitored dead zone right in the middle of the estate.
It's so smart, honestly.
It is. The ghosts keep the oversight committees and the honest servants away, allowing the bad actors to strip the garden of its remaining valuables, cutting down rare timber, stealing fixtures, fencing remaining assets in total secrecy.
The supernatural is just camouflage for an ongoing heist.
Exactly.
So Cheng Rixing clearly outlines the problem, but he also provides a highly logical, actionable solution, right?
He does. He proposes a rapid restructuring.
Right. He advises Jia Zheng to appoint one deeply trusted individual to conduct a ruthless audit of every single department, fire the corrupt managers, retain the honest ones, and fundamentally force the managers responsible for the deficits to pay back the stolen funds from their own pockets, stop the bleed through immediate accountability.
It is standard, sensible crisis management. Audit, consolidate, enforce.
So my question is, why does Jia Zheng instantly and categorically reject this plan? Is he just lazy?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we are looking at the fatal flaw of his executive style.
Right.
It is not mere laziness.
Okay, what is it then?
It is an obsession with the aesthetics of traditional Confucian leadership at the expense of its practical application.
He dismisses Cheng Rixing, claiming, "You don't understand." He offers a litany of excuses.
Right.
He says he cannot trust anyone to do the audit, not even his own nephews. He claims his current state of mourning prevents him from taking aggressive action.
He even falls back on self-deprecation, claiming he has never possessed the talent for household management anyway.
We could categorize his behavior as toxic passivity, masquerading as moral superiority. Jia Zheng cares far more about his PR than his P&L.
Oh, absolutely. He explicitly tells Cheng Rixing that since his grandfather's era, the family brand has been built on benevolence and generosity. He states he has never been a harsh master, and he refuses to start acting like a tyrant now just to save some money, fearing the social ridicule it might bring.
He is prioritizing the optical illusion of magnanimity over his fundamental duty to protect the institution.
Right. In the Confucian framework, the patriarch is responsible for the order and survival of the family. By refusing to be harsh, which in this specific context simply means holding thieves accountable for their crimes.
Right, just basic accountability.
Jia Zheng is actively facilitating the destruction of his own lineage.
He utilizes his grief, his supposed kindness, and his admitted incompetence as highly effective shields against the difficult, unpopular labor of executive decision-making.
It's incredibly frustrating to read.
And it's incredibly common, too. We've all seen this in modern workplaces or communities.
Oh, definitely.
Think of the CEO, the board president, or the community leader who absolutely refuses to fire a highly toxic employee or refuses to initiate a forensic audit of missing funds, all under the guise of maintaining a positive culture or trusting the team.
Right. The leader gets to preserve their self-image as the nice guy, while the organization slowly bleeds to death, the honest employees burn out, and the bad actors eventually hollow out the entire structure.
Jia Zheng's benevolence is, in reality, a profound moral cowardice.
That's exactly what it is. And Cheng Rixing attempts one final warning. He points out the macroeconomic reality.
Right.
He says other incredibly wealthy families might possess the deep reserves necessary to survive this level of systemic theft for a decade, but the Jia family's reserves are gone. They cannot survive the year.
But Jia Zheng simply deflects. The audit fails not because the data is wrong, but because the executive lacks the fortitude to act on it. The rot is fully systemic, top-down, and bottom-up.
And it is precisely at this moment of total paralysis, as the Jia family sinks under the weight of its own mismanagement, that the narrative introduces the final stage of our anatomy of a collapse.
Step 5. A visitor arrives at the estate gates, representing a trajectory moving in the exact opposite direction.
Yes. The servants announce the arrival of Xin Yingjie.
Okay, the historical and geopolitical context of the Zhen family is essential to understanding this final act.
It really is. The Zins are an aristocratic family from the south, Jinling, the very place Xifeng was hallucinating about. They are old allies of the Jias, but their recent history serves as a chilling prequel to the Jia family's current nightmare.
Because years earlier, the Zhen family suffered a catastrophic fall from grace.
Right. They were targeted by the emperor, stripped of their noble titles, and their vast wealth was confiscated.
They experienced the exact same imperial raid the Jias are experiencing right now.
Exactly the same.
But Zhen Yingjie is not arriving to commiserate about their shared poverty. He is arriving to announce a spectacular political rehabilitation.
The imperial winds have shifted. Zhen Yingjie reveals that the emperor has suddenly restored him to favor. His titles have been returned, his properties are being restored.
And he has been assigned a massive, highly critical military and political objective.
Yes, the empire is currently fighting a war against coastal pirates in the south, and Zhen Yingjie has been appointed to suppress them.
The intrusion of this macro-political reality into the domestic tragedy of the Jia family is incredibly jarring.
It is.
I mean, we have spent this entire deep dive examining the microeconomics of pawn jewelry and haunted gardens, and suddenly the narrative pulls back to reveal imperial decrees and massive coastal warfare.
It forces the reader to recognize the extreme fragility of the elite class. Their entire existence is predicated on the volatile whims of imperial favor.
And this geopolitical instability is actively severing their micro-level family ties. During the visit, Jia Zhang asks Zhen Yinjie for a crucial favor.
Right.
Jia Zhang's daughter is married to a local military commander stationed down in that pirate-infested region.
And because of the ongoing war and the disruption of communication lines, the Jia family has completely lost contact with her.
The empire's instability is literally tearing the family apart geographically.
It is. But the geopolitical machinations, as fascinating as they are, serve primarily as the backdrop for the absolute climax of this encounter.
Yes. So as Zhen Yingjie prepares to leave the estate, he accidentally crosses paths with Jia Baoyu, and the reaction is instantaneous. Zhen Yingjie stops dead in his tracks, completely stunned.
Because Zhen Jingjie has a son of his own, also named Baoyu Zhen Baoyu.
Okay.
And upon seeing Jia Baoyu, Zhen Yingjie realizes they don't just share a name. He states that Jia Baoyu is an exact, flawless physical replica of his own son.
Wait, really? Like, identical?
Yes. He observes that not only are their facial features identical, but their micro-expressions, their mannerisms, their entire physical presence is duplicated.
Wow. We are suddenly thrust into the literary and psychological territory of the doppelganger.
Yes, we are.
To understand the mechanism here, we have to look at the philosophical duality the author, Cao Suikin, embedded in the novel's foundation. The concept of Zen versus Jia.
It is the core linguistic pun of the entire narrative. The surname Jia is a homophone for false or fictitious.
Right.
And the surname Zen is a homophone for true or real. You have two families, the true and the false, acting as structural mirrors.
So the Zen family plummeted into ruin, hit the bottom, and is now rapidly ascending back to the apex of imperial power. While the Jia family reached the absolute apex and is now rapidly plummeting into terminal ruin.
It's an elevator system of fate. As one car goes up, the other must go down. And standing at the exact center of each family is an identical boy named Baoyu.
So we have to ask, what does this all mean? Is Zhen Baoyu a warning? Is he a parallel universe manifestation of who Jia Baoyu might be if the true circumstances were different?
He represents the inescapable cyclical nature of rise and fall. But how Jia Baoyu reacts to the existence of his literal mirror image is the final, definitive diagnostic of his character.
Because he does not view this doppelganger as a profound philosophical warning or a moment for introspection at all.
No, not even slightly. He is simply thrilled by the novelty of it.
He practically sprints back to the inner chambers to tell his wife, Bao Chai, the news. He explains that this identical Zhen Baoyu will be arriving in the capital soon.
And his immediate proposal for how to handle this event is just staggering in its immaturity.
It really is. He tells Bao Chai that when this stranger arrives, all the women of the inner household must go out and look at him to verify if the resemblance is truly exact.
He treats the manifestation of his own doppelganger as a circus attraction, a fun diversion for the family to gawk at.
He entirely misses the ominous structural implications of the Zen family's rise.
Completely misses it.
Yeah.
And Bao Chai's reaction to his proposal is swift, sharp, and totally uncompromising.
She shuts him down immediately. She demands to know why he's speaking so carelessly.
Right.
She points out the absolute absurdity of him suggesting that the sequestered women of the household should parade out to stare at a strange man simply because he shares Baoyu's face.
Her reprimand is not just about prudishness, though. It is about defending the final remaining bastion of their identity.
Exactly. The estate's finances are utterly destroyed. The political protection is gone. They are pawning their possessions to bury their dead. But Bao Chai remains fiercely, relentlessly protective of their social propriety and the strict gender boundaries of their aristocratic class.
She is holding the line. She is reminding Baoyu that the rules of their society, the structures of decorum, haven't simply vanished just because their bank accounts have been zeroed out.
Right. A strange man is still a strange man, regardless of an identical face.
Propriety is the absolute last structural wall she has left to defend, and she will not let Baoyu tear it down for a moment of novelty.
It reveals what individuals cling to when the material world falls away. For Bao Chai, adherence to the rules is her final mechanism of control in an uncontrollable collapse.
Yes.